Bets Puna Medalgo. So you know the questions. So
yes, I do know the questions. Yes, I do know the questions. Yes, I will vote to bring the school buses back if that is the way to make students and their parents feel safe and secure about getting to school and getting to school on time. That said, I am not automatically against the idea of students being on SunTran buses. I actually think that it is or it can be a good idea. But if it's not working, it's not working. And if it's being applied in a way that is racially motivated, which would be nothing new for this district or economically motivated, then it can't happen. But to me, if we are trying to decide how we keep schools open, and if one piece of that is that we need to save money by sending not just Pueblo High School kids, but all high school kids on buses, and that the bus system needs to be changed in order to accommodate that, then I think I am that committed to keeping schools open that that's the kind of balance that I would want to look at. And so I'm sorry that that doesn't get the cheers, but I think what we're talking about here... Sure.
Could you answer that with a yes?
Yes, I did answer it with a yes.
But no,
No, I'm sorry, you said that I could expand on it, so I'm expanding on it. It's a yes if.
So that's a no.
No, that is, I'm sorry, I object. It is not a no. That is not a no, and I will not be put into that box. Okay. To me, the important thing is that students and their parents feel safe. It may be the case that in the future, yellow school buses aren't what does it for you. In that case, I'm not going to vote for yellow school buses. I'm going to vote for what makes students and their parents feel safe and get to school on time. Because that's the bottom line. It's not a matter of what color the bus is. It's a matter of you get to school on time and you feel safe on the way. I actually think that open enrollment is part of a good idea that doesn't work out very well on the ground. If you're an open enrollment student, you don't get transportation.
Yeah.
So what the heck is that about? We are in the church. What is that about? That basically means it's open enrollment for people who can afford to drive their kids to school. And that is not fair. So I think the whole transportation system needs to be overhauled so that it is an egalitarian system that works for everyone and not just for people who have their own cars. Because basically I think that's how the system has rolled out in the last couple of years.
thank you. I'd like to thank you all again for coming and making us our priority on the south side.
Ves que a algunos no le importa al sur de su comunidad, les damos gracias por enseñarles interés en su comunidad.
Now we would like to open it up for questions from the audience. We have 3 minutes and would like to limit questions for 2 to 3 minutes. So whoever wants to come up and ask questions can.
Y ahorita vamos a abrir el cuestionario para que la gente venga acá y a preguntar cualquier interés que tienen a los candidatos. Vamos a limitar las preguntas a 3 minutos. Entonces, por favor, hágase para arriba. Tienen preguntas, pues.
Should we have them line up here, Brian?
You can start right
Anybody
here.
wants to have a question, come right here.
What?
Speak into the mic if anybody has a question.
I have a question. I was a teacher before. I have a lot of voice. I taught for TUSD when I first came to Tucson 26 years ago, and I mostly taught in this area, southwest area, because that's where I live, and that's where I raised my kids, and that's where my kids went to school, and my grandchildren are going to school. But I served a couple of committees during that time, 25 years ago, that they were, when they were looking at the DSEG and the differences between East Side School and Southwest Side schools, and there's a big difference, man. And I want to know, what are you guys going to do if elected to close that gap on inequality between the schools over there on the east side and our schools over here for our children?
Before I answer that, Sally, and if you allow me a moment to articulate this, I think Beth brings up a really good point about safety. My wife, up until last week, was the director of the Southern Arizona Center Against Sexual Assault. They have a program here in South Tucson called Subos Valley, and they deal with sexual violence, sexual assaults. There has been a scary increase in the number of calls that they got from this area, from young women complaining about sexual harassment on Suntran buses. So it's not to counter what Beth is saying, but it is an issue of providing options. Some options are to take the Suntran, some options are to take those yellow school buses. I just want to clarify that, because I don't want her to get a bad rap for that, because I think her response is actually pretty on point. So, en español un poquitito, y me perdonen porque no les hablé en español antes, pero principalmente es una cosa de seguridad. Mi esposa era la directora de un programa que lidia mucho con abuso sexual y asaltos y harassment, no sé qué sea la palabra en español para harassment, pero principalmente estaban reportando muchos más asaltos con niñas en el distrito escolar, que personas en los bases de Suntran nos estaban dando de carrilla a las niñas, y no está bien eso. Entonces tenemos que considerar eso en la seguridad de los estudiantes. So the other thing, to answer your question, Sally Ann, I would say, en inglés primero, luego les traduzco en español si me permiten, that it's an issue of equity. Look, I was raised with a disability, obviously. It's not something that happened last week. So I'm used to dealing with adversity. And as a person of color, I've been used to dealing with adversity even more. When I left my small town where 95% of us were brown, and I came to Tucson, I was blown away. I had culture shock. You know, it was the largest amount of white people I'd ever seen in my life. And it wasn't like it was scary, it was just different. But certainly, I know what it's like to be treated differently. And I went to the University of Arizona, and it was difficult. And so it's an issue of equity. Then you include the other issue, the issue of equity between sexes, men and women. And then the other issue of equity with people with disabilities. So there's a lot of equity that we're talking about. We're not just talking about race or class. It's across the board. That's why OCR is here. That's why we need to be dealing with this issue. So we're, number one, going to wait to see what's going on with that desegregation order. But we're not just going to wait. We're going to start planning. We're going to start talking, like she said, with other folks in the community, actually, like Don said. So it's an issue of, we're going to involve the community and parents to bring about better solutions, because the administration doesn't know about that inequity. The families and students know about inequity.
Thank you.
Yo también soy maestra aquí en el sur de Tucson, trabajo para Sunnyside y Sunnyside Pride. Y como maestra, mi experiencia también es falta de recursos para unas escuelas en el Southside en comparación a los otros. So I'm a teacher. I teach in Sunnyside, just down the street, down the end of 12th in Valencia is where I'm teaching right now. And as a teacher, I have definitely always experienced a lack of resources in Southside schools compared to other schools. And I'd like to, I was at a conference, or a bilingual education conference early in my career, and an ex-gang member was the speaker. And he explained that, and this was actually in Denver, Colorado, not here in Arizona, but he explained that he understood his life the day that he went to a Cherry Creek school, which is similar to like a Foothills school. And he said, with the day that I went to a school on the other side of the city, my life made sense, because
they are being prepared to work in the business world. And in my school, I'm being prepared for cement walls and bars. And that gave me chills, and it impacted me for the rest of my career, because it's true. You know, just those physical inequities, and I'm not even talking about curricular inequities or transportation like we're talking about, food inequities, many, many inequities. And I think what I bring as a candidate to that conversation is that understanding of that perspective, and as a teacher in South Tucson, and I have always taught, you know, in lower income communities in escuelas bilingües, and I've always been an advocate for my students and my families, and so that's what I bring to those decisions. So I think most of my plan is that it's a priority. It has to be in the front of the discussions, and it's definitely in the front of my perspectives, most definitely.
This is the time to ask another question, you guys. So is anyone else?
Juan here.
Oh, okay. Which?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to make a clarification because I have a daughter at USD who is in an open enrollment program, so she's not in her neighborhood school, and she does have bus transportation. So again, I think this comes down to issues of equity of a different kind, because my daughter, and I live north of St. Mary's, near St. Mary's, but north of St. Mary's, can get a bus to a magnet program that we have selected. So, I mean, I think that issue does still stand. And one of my main questions too is, I don't know how to word this very well, but I mean, we do look at within TUSD itself these differences across these schools, and how would you as candidates, first of all, I think we need more resources for the district, and I know Prop 204 is out there. It'd be nice to get a little bit more money into the district. We're 50 out of 50 states in education funding. But the other thing is, so, you know, yes, how would you like to bring more resources into the district, if possible, if the board can do that? And secondly, how would you kind of mush them out? How would you, I mean, is this redistribution? Is there something specific that you can talk about to help redistribute those resources? Thank you.
Please. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for the question, and thanks for the clarification. It's true that magnet students do have transportation. So, but my understanding anyway is that the rest of the students do not. If you're an open enrollment student for a non-magnet school, you do not have transportation, and that is just completely and totally unfair and unjust. I would like to look at school funding in order to look at that. I've been asking this question at board meetings, and here's something that I don't understand, and if somebody can clarify this for me, I'll be really happy to hear it. My understanding is that the funding goes with the student. The state funding goes with the student. They say every student has a backpack. And if the student is an English language learner, the backpack has a little more money in it because it has DSEG money in it. If the student is a Title I student, the backpack has a little more money in it, etc. But so then you get schools that are under-enrolled and underfunded. And this is the part I don't understand. It seems to me that it makes much more sense for all of the state money that does not have to be reported on, like the Title I money has to be reported on, but the state money that comes in from our taxes, that money should be distributed among schools in an equitable way to bring up the schools that are underfunded, it seems to me, because otherwise you are going to be in a cycle of under-enrollment, underfunded school, continued under-enrollment, etc. And we've all seen that. We all know of schools that we think that the district has had on the chopping block for years, right? The principals start switching out every couple of years, and all sorts of other issues come along, and holy moly, one day the school is closed and the district's got a list of reasons why, that's as long as you're on, but all of the parents feel like, no, the real reason why is because it's in a poor part of town. You thought that we wouldn't organize against this. You thought that we wouldn't be strong enough to keep this school open. And as a person who came from a school where we were strong enough to keep the school open, I think that that's what is happening from the district perspective. But I would like to know about the funding, and so this is sort of a new issue of mine. Desegregation is not a new issue of mine. It's a primary reason why I'm running. But following the funding, following the money, is the part that I would like to look into, because it's not equitable at all. And the other thing, so I want to look into that. The other thing that I want to do is, I said at the last forum that I would not vote to close schools, and that is true. I will not. I think schools are going to be closed, however. And I think that the popular struggle needs to be, you do not close schools where the population is growing, and that is here. And while Michael Hicks says, I don't like to close schools, and I particularly don't want to close any schools on the east side, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Hicks, but it is on the east side where the demographics are changing and where we no longer have kids. I myself have a different plan to keep schools open and to turn them back into a community hub, but I'm sure my time is up.
Maybe would you like to answer another question?
Well, my question is, TLSD has just approved a 4.5 bus depot in the southwest side. How will that increase or decrease the chances of public receiving their buses back?
I believe with the bus depot, that should definitely increase your chances. And even if they didn't have a bus depot, you should have bus transportation for your kids. That shouldn't be a reason. The money is there. And what particularly disturbs me, I have 2 kids in TUSD, one at Corbett in 4th grade and one in Doolin in 7th grade. And we need quality teachers in every single school. It doesn't have to be on the east side, it can be on the south side. These teachers, they're professional teachers, and they can educate the kids regardless where they're coming from. And I think the focus needs to be on the student. And it definitely needs to be in the classroom, especially in the elementary level. I think it's very important, the reading and the math and the writing programs. That definitely needs to start in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And we can emphasize on heading into that situation to make sure that these kids can read. In order for the TUSD administration to be able to do that, more of the funding needs to go into the classroom instead of the administration. And it's been in the past where I've been told, and I'm not mentioning any names, in the finance department, financial administrator, mentioned that even though they closed 9 schools in the last few years, they still don't think it's necessary to reduce the overhead administration. Well, I think if they're closing 9 schools, they have to cut the overhead, and they have to make sure that the administration is focusing on the needs of our kids, and especially also on the transportation, which I believe is so important. None of the schools should have a lack of transportation in any part of our community. And I think your kids deserve to be on the bus.
I just wanted to state that in no way or another are we against Suntran. We actually support it as a service to our community. Y quiero decir que en ninguna manera estamos en contra de los camiones de Suntran. Estamos apoyando y damos gracias por sus servicios aquí en Tucson. Y no estamos atacando a nadie. Somos una comunidad entre así oficios y cosas así, entre los camioneros y los pasajeros. Thank you.
Very briefly, I was involved with the first West Side Transportation Facility that the TUSD tried to put in a neighborhood, inside the heart of a neighborhood. And some folks are going to argue that I talk too much, but that's how you advocate for community. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. I stopped that West Side Transportation Facility that TUC was planning because it wasn't so much about how they were going to expand the transportation benefits to our school kids. They were talking about incorporating a public-private development where they were going to lease land to a company that was going to develop solar power. They were also going to sell natural gas. They were going to have a gas station the way they have it on over here on Campbell in Keno. And so it wasn't really about how they were going to expand bus services for kids on this side of town. It was about how they were going to expand and diversify how they were going to bring resources into the district. In a way that's good, but in a way it wasn't about the kids. It was about how they were going to bring in more money, not necessarily that it was going into the classroom. So how would do I think that transportation facility is going to help? You know, they knew that transportation facility was coming. They had the money for it, bond money, and then they still shut down the school buses because of this deficit. So you explained to me how they developed a West Side Transportation Facility, $4.5 million, and it's a different pot of money, but then they go and shut down school buses. How is that going to benefit anybody? It's like building a warehouse for products that aren't going to be there. It's just a sign of the economy, but I'm sorry, it's not a good plan, it's a lack of planning. I'm an urban planner, I'm going to have a different say in that if I get on the board.
I have kind of a two-part question. The first part is a lot of schools in the district, for example, Ochoa Elementary, which is now a Reggio-inspired elementary, are kind of under a chokehold with the standardized testing issues that have been going on in our school, which I know is also a big part of the budget. I know the TUSD district does spend a lot of money on these standardized testing. Now, Ochoa Elementary is in danger of losing their magnet school funding because of this standardized testing. They didn't score well on the testing, so using that test, they're reflecting the way that the school's running as a Reggio. Now, if you're elected, how can you help with the standardized testing craze that's been going on? Because in a school like Ochoa Elementary, which is Reggio, we're trying to teach the kids a new way of thinking, but when it comes to test time, we have to throw all that out the window and get them and sit them down in front of a desk and teach them this is how you got to learn for the next few weeks until you test, which kind of goes against everything we're trying to teach. How can you help that? And the second part of the question is, what makes you a better candidate than the rest of your running mates?
Questions, so if you guys could be kind of brief, please.
So I'll start with your first question, is what sets me apart from the other candidates is that I'm a teacher. And so we have an opportunity to have a teacher on the school board, and I think that's, we've had other teachers on the school board before who have done really important things for TUSD, and so that's the perspective that I hope to bring. And I've been a teacher before the standardized test craze, and I've seen in the last 15 years how that has drained our classrooms and our learning and our creativity and our critical thinking. And so I bring that understanding to those decisions. I also appreciate that a test is like a snapshot, a one-time photograph of an entire movie, an entire video of a student's year. And so it's not fair just to make a judgment on one photograph, right? Think about your year in your life. You wouldn't just take one photograph and say that's, 2012. So many other things happen in that child's life and learning, most definitely. So we need school board members who appreciate and understand that we need multiple measuring points to understand our learners, understand how well our learners are achieving, and our teachers, most definitely. We have a new evaluation system, and our teachers for the first time are being held to those standardized tests as well as our students. So I want to bring that perspective and that understanding to those decisions. Thank you.
I came to this country at the age of 12. I was born in Amsterdam, Netherlands. I speak 3 languages. Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. And I personally had problems with taking tests in school. I did quite well, with my homework and doing everything else. But when it comes to taking tests, there was a lot of pressure. And there's a lot of pressure trying to get that score up and trying to pass it. And I think it has to be equal basis. I think you just can't depend on tests alone. you have to also depend on the performance, what the kids do in the classroom. And that should be accountable towards the grading of the testing scores. Second of all, as far as being a candidate for the TUSD Governing Board, I believe I have the backbone to make decisions and have the leadership to implement those decisions and make sure that they carry out. You know, give the administration a deadline, tell them 30 days or 60 days, and I want some results. And nothing about waiting 6 months or a year before we get results. And, was that it? Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, can I just, when you ask a question of how do you separate yourself from the other candidates, you kind of really have to give everybody a chance, don't you? to ask one? I'm sorry, no, I mean, I understand, but that's a,
Yeah, sorry.
hey, man. So here's what I like about, here's not what I like about standardized testing, but here's what I think of when I think of standardized testing. So you have an elephant, a snake, a fish, and a monkey. And then you have a teacher. I know, I was hoping the kids would show me what that looked like. And then you have the teacher, and the teacher says, okay, it's a standardized test. Everybody gets started on climbing that tree. Who makes it to the top of the tree? Yeah, well, you do, exactly. So, the problem with standardized tests is that we do not have standardized students, and we don't want standardized students. It is not a marker that measures anything. It's not just the fact that we have too many of them and that they're bubble tests. It's also the fact that they don't measure what they say they're going to measure. And so not only do they not effectively measure our kids, they should not be used to measure our schools, and they should not be used to measure our teachers. And so we have to get rid of the whole, it's a movement, standardized tests, and we have to set ourselves against it. There are states that are opting out of it. There are parents that are opting out of it. We need to educate ourselves about that and make that happen in our community, because standardized tests, especially high stakes, are completely contrary to learning. Quickly, in terms of what sets me apart from other candidates, I am a parent who's had a child in the district for 7 years. I have been going to board meetings for 3 or 4 years. I feel like my learning curve is going to be much shorter because I know what happens at the school site, and I know what happens at the board, and I can see the enormous disconnect between the two. And so that's what I feel like my strength is. And I hope somebody will ask us a question about what our process would be to solve a community problem like the one we're looking at tonight.
Okay, so we'll ask another question, but somebody did make a point that we should all answer that question, and it's good. We are all vying for 3 seats. There's only 4 of us up here, so it should be pretty easy to do, right? You shouldn't vote for any of those guys. But anyways, to answer the question, standardized tests, well, you know what, let's take standardized out of it. Let's just look at tests. Tests used to be an instrument to try to measure what we needed to do with the kids to make them better students. Tests, when we used to take them when I was a kid, I used to take the CAT test, the California Aptitude Test. It told our teachers where we needed to improve, where we needed help. These tests now are to tell people how to punish the districts, how to punish the teachers, how to punish the schools, and ultimately how to punish the students. It's no secret. It's no secret that the state of Arizona and the state legislature is attempting to privatize our public school system. So to answer your question, the young man who left, my kid is at Ochoa, by the way. So, and he just started school. And I'm a TUSD parent, and I'm very concerned about this because Julian is very creative, and I wonder if he's going to do well on these tests. I don't know. He's just starting. But so, to answer that question is, how do we deal with that? Well, you know what? We elect people that are going to change the system. Sally Ann Gonzalez is in the room. Please stand up, Sally Ann. We elect people like Sally Ann because she is willing to stand for the kids. The presidential debate tonight, that president, we need to figure out whether or not he's going to stand with us on public education, or if he's going to support charter schools. So that's what we need to do. We need to get involved, we need to be educated on how to get our kids to become active in politics so that we can elect good people, so we can get rid of
So clearly, a really big issue in this election, as with the general election, is the budget. I believe that I read in Tucson Weekly, correct me if I'm wrong, that the president of the school board got a fairly large raise this past year, voted on by school board members? Superintendent, my bad. Would you consider some sort of salary cap or a salary freeze if it meant that we could get money into the classrooms, money to the teachers, even if it were to affect you personally?
Well, that's easy because we are all going for a voluntary position, so there are no wages involved here. So you're welcome to cut them. I think that's not a bad idea. I mean, certainly lowering the salaries or consolidating the people at 1010. My motto has been consolidate 1010, don't consolidate schools. So I think that's probably an okay way to go about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person.
Be able to ask questions. Okay, so this is a forum on education and equality within students. So we're talking about the buses, and that's an attack on our students and how that's making it very difficult for students to succeed within their schools. The question is then, what is your plans for education within the schools? You know, like not just the buses, but like, for example, classes that have been cut, like class studies and other classes that are helping students succeed. What are your plans for the future of ethnic studies or any other classes that are actually helping students excel in school?
Like I said, we talk a lot. Ethnic studies, Chicano studies, Mexican American studies. We are 67% of the population in TUSD, okay? Right off the bat. This part of town is growing. This is the part of town, as Beth put it earlier, it's not the east side of folks. And again, not being a race issue. This is about where it's growing, and it's growing within this population. Does this mean we ignore everything else? Absolutely not. Does this mean we ignore the kids with special needs? No. Does this mean we ignore science, technology, engineering, and math? No. But this does mean that we create a district where students are going to want to come to the district. What am I going to do? I'm going to take steps to make sure that we're giving you, the students, what you want and what is necessary for you to learn. So we're going to support this program.
Yes, most definitely. I'm a huge supporter of ethnic studies. It worked. We had the community behind it. We had the data behind it, and it should never have ever been cut. We let the threat of $15 million in that program, a beloved program, the same way we're letting a threat of $17 million cut schools. And we need to stop having those threats cut important critical programs. Something about TUSD is we're a huge district. We're an enormous district, right? We have 10 high schools, which means we need to let that size work work in our advantage, which means we can have more programs, more diverse programs for every student here. We don't just have one high school with one program. They don't have to look all alike. They can meet the needs of that specific community. When you look at Ochoa, it's meeting the needs of what the parents of that community looks like. And that's what we can have in every different school in our district.
How are you as candidates going to stop the abuse of abusing DSEG money, and how will you solve it if you are elected?
That's a very difficult question. It's an important question, absolutely. If I was a board member, I would definitely look into the budget, find out where the funds are going, and make sure that every nickel and dollar that's being spent is accountable. It's a fiscal responsibility that's need to be addressed in the TUSD administration, and I definitely will put every effort behind me to make sure that the funding is being equal across the board in every single school.
I think your question was about the DSEG funds. And we definitely have a tradition, unfortunately, of a bad practice of misusing those funds, right? And it was kind of like this pot of money that people could do, different programs that weren't accountable to what the DSEG order talks about. And so we have to be faithful to that DSEG order and faithful to what the goals are, right? Before, it wasn't ever tied, the DSEG funds were not tied to academic achievement. And I think that has to be there as well this time. And I'm really excited to see what it says in November. And I believe in the principle behind it, in bringing equity and equality to our district and to do the right thing for our students. And we need the right board to make sure we do that, most definitely.
Thank you, I'd like to thank you all again for coming tonight. Okay, so the next steps after attending this forum is to attend the Thursday budget cut meeting at Pueblo High School at 6:30. One last question? Okay. It's our last question of the day.
I can speak loud. You did elaborate some on about the closing. I'm a new teacher for the school district, and I just want to say, wow, the resources we have in this district, it's wonderful what you have. I haven't had to ask for anything. Everything just showed up for me. It's wonderful.
Where do you teach?
Ochoa. Usually, like, if I have a kid, I'm not buying the shoes and give it to the kid. No, they're like, why are you buying shoes for that kid? We got a closet over here. You don't need anything. The school district had everything for my students to show up for school. Day one. No problem. Everything I needed to teach, everything. My issue was, you've answered all the questions about the transparency, obviously, that you want to have in the budget, and knowing that there's going to be some challenges, and we've asked you some really hard questions that you can't possibly be a yes or no right now, knowing that maybe they're going to vote on some things before you come into office. As a teacher, I want to know your opinion about the trend